much. Thank you, Menashe, for the opportunity to speak here. I just want to say that someone with quite a long history in arbitration, I think that you're doing an amazing job at the Institute of the late Professor Ottolenghi, who was my PhD supervisor. And you stepped into her shoes and you're doing an amazing job. I also want to thank Gila Rabinovich, whom I know for 30 years, I think, maybe a little less. You're doing an amazing job too. Thank you. And of course, Shai Sharvit, I think he's not here. He's hopping in between the events and the organizing committee of the Tel Aviv Arbitration Week. I just have a few words to say at the beginning. As you know, and I'm talking to our international participants in this conference, it's very calm here. The roads were calm. In some places, they were not. We're in a process here dealing with checks and balances between the different branches, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. And I'd like to begin actually with some kind of an analogy. Talking about the interrelationship between courts and arbitration and the supervisory role that the courts assume in arbitration. This supervisory role is explained by the mere presumption that as a consensual method of dispute resolution, arbitration should have a control mechanism. And I'd like to quote from Professor Michael Reisman's seminal book, which was actually published 30 years ago, Systems of Control in International Adjudication and Arbitration, Breakdown and Repair. And Professor Reisman wrote that with a control mechanism, arbitrator, and I quote, remains a delegated and restricted power. Without controls, it becomes absolute. Thereafter, the arbitrator, like the Roman emperor, may be tempted to say, and I'll say in Latin, quod voluit arbiter havet vigorem legis, which means whatever the arbitrator wants, that is the law. This, of course, is something that the arbitration community cannot and does not accept. Systems of control are necessary in order to prevent the arbitrator from acting contrary to the parties' agreement. So I'll end with this analogy for our guests and for Israeli citizens, and we'll go now to the panel. So 6 years ago, during the ICA Arbitration Congress in Mauritius, I was asked to give a talk called Do Post-Award Remedies Appropriately Ensure Conformity of the Arbitral Process with the Rule of Law? And my role was to provide a comparative approach or a comparative view from the Middle East, comparing the legal regimes in Israel and the United Arab Emirates. And 4 years afterwards, the Abraham Accords were signed. The Accords represents a major historic milestone in international diplomacy and a significant achievement towards promoting peace, stability, and prosperity, and in unlocking the great economic potential relationship between the United Arab Emirates and the State of Israel, as well as throughout the Middle East. As we heard in the last panel, the UAE and the State of Israel signed also a bilateral investment treaty. The agreement, which is considered a modernized BIT, provides for an elaborate investor-state dispute resolution mechanism, containing as a first stage a consultation and negotiation, which, if failed, could be followed by a submission to arbitration under the ICSID Convention, the UNCITRAL arbitration rule, and if the disputing parties agree, under any other arbitration institution or arbitration rules. Additionally, in 2022, the UAE and Israel signed a free trade agreement which followed the lifting of tariffs on 96% of goods traded between the two countries within 5 years. Trade between the countries is expanding exponentially, as we have just heard. So while trade is expanding, it is only a matter of time that disputes will arise and parties will seek dispute resolution procedures.